assistant professor. I'm a clinical assistant professor, and I teach literacy methods in the teacher education program, as well as courses focused on culturally and linguistically diverse education. And Dr. Anderson, do you want to describe your role?
Sure. I'm also a clinical assistant professor, as well as the director of the teacher education program here for the university, and teach in our teacher ed programming. So it's great to be here with you
all. So William and I have identified a pervasive problem of practice that we see happening across institutions, not only DU. And it's how we support our mostly white educators and future educators of color together to teach students of color in urban contexts through culturally responsive pedagogy. So we'll give you a little bit of our context and tell you a little bit about some of our issues and problems. And then we want to hear from you. We want to hear what are some of your ideas? What are some of your issues and problems that you're dealing with? And then at the end, we'd like to close with like a collective call to action. How can we support one another to get better in this area? So that's what our day looks like. So I'm going to start off with just a brief overview. You may be familiar with our program, so I apologize if you know a lot of the background of it, but some people may not. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background. We have a teacher education program that's a 1-year licensure and master's program over at the University of Denver. We call this our apprenticeship program. We call our teachers teacher apprenticeships. They are largely in our DPS Title I schools. There's a few exceptions, but largely in some charter schools as well. We have an urban teacher fellowship, and within that, and that's just for some of our apprentice teachers. So they have to apply for it. Within the Urban Teacher Fellowship, we have the Para to Teacher Pipeline, which is a 2-year program within UTF. And then we have just a general UTF fellow where they get a scholarship. It reduces the cost of the program, and there's a small stipend. The demographics of our program, we have largely white middle-class apprentice teachers, 58 total this year, 6 identifies people of color. We use the framework for effective and equitable teaching as an assessment tool out in the field with our teachers. So William and I are both supervisors as well, and we support teachers out in the field, and we use this as a feedback tool. It's built around culturally responsive pedagogy, humanizing pedagogy, and it also provides measurable feedback to our teachers. The domains on the feet are look at ways we can engage, plan, and teach, and also lead. And I just put one example of one of the competencies on here, and that is to establish respectful and productive relationships with students and families. Then there's 4 indicators we look for with our students. So Dr. Anderson is going to talk about some of our problems and issues.
Yes. So as we're thinking about our programming, and before we dig into the problems and issues, I definitely do want to highlight the great work that we're doing. The schools that we're able to get in, our students are able to really begin to feel at home and get their feet wet as apprentice teachers, taking over full classrooms by early in their 2nd semester at their schools. And they get a real true taste of what it means to be a teacher, while also having that scaffolding by their mentor teacher and us as supervisors to help them grow and develop into the first year and early teachers that they want to be. But some of the issues that we are running into are recruiting a diverse population of apprentice teachers. As the stat above says, we have 58 teachers, only 6 identify as students of color. And that really kind of becomes an issue not mainly, but because the schools that they're being placed in are very much schools with student bodies that that the majority of the students would be identified as people of color or students of color. Outside of that, the cost, this is DU, and the cost of the program, even in a 13-month stint, is still something that we are trying to reconcile and trying to find ways to make it more affordable for students. Outside of that, supervision. with our budget constraints around how many supervisors we can have, we have supervisors who are having caseloads of apprentice teachers that vary between 8 and up to 11 different apprentice teachers that they need to supervise over the year that they're with us, which is just, it's a lot to be able to provide the detailed and the touch points necessary in order to help grow our future teachers. We are also thinking about ways that we can better support our students socially and emotionally, as well as academically, because they are doing their program in just a year, 13 months relatively. There is a lot of coursework that goes along with it, and it goes right along with them being introduced into their schools and into their spaces. And it can be a lot for them. It can be a lot academically, it can be a lot socially and emotionally. So trying to get them a way to understand the balance between coursework and field work without just kind of giving them the old adage that like, hey, you're in grad school, it's going to be hard, you're going to have these sleepless nights, and trying to make them kind of burn it at both ends to get through it. We want to try to think about it a bit more strategically and how we can help one hand coursework watch the other field work. And finally, the praxis and getting our students to be able to pass the praxis that they will need to pass in order for them to be licensed in Colorado to teach. It's a problem that's not a huge one, but it is one that each year we're bumping into with a couple of students who are struggling to get over that hump of passing the praxis, whether they're taking it early or later in our program. It could be something that is that starts off as a small hiccup, but if it isn't taken care of by early in the spring, can be a really, really major hiccup for our students, because coupled with their degree is them passing the praxis. So just a few of the things we're thinking about and in trying to improve and finding ways to get bigger, faster, and stronger as a program.
So we have a space on the Google Doc for questions, but I think it would just be awesome to just ask questions as a group. Does anybody have any questions, or would they like to put them in the chat or on the document?
You have data on that, Dr. Anderson, about how many candidates a year, semester that don't pass the praxis that's holding licensure up?
So at the moment, as of last year, of our last cohort of about 60 students, only three actually were not able to pass by the time graduation came, and we had to delay it. So it's a significant minority of students, but it's still enough that, you know, we want to try to be a bit more strategic about it. As of right now, I think we have 15 students left who need to pass the praxis or show that they have already passed it going into this next quarter, or our next quarter.
Thank you. Lift Up Beth says that she's experiencing similar challenges. Thank you, Beth. I think we'll go ahead and move on to our culturally responsive practices. So we'll really get to the meat of our mission and our goal for our students within our program.
Before we go to that, Kim,
Oh,
can we have
yeah,
everybody, since there's not too many of us, just kind of say where they're at,
yeah,
let's say you have some of the same issues. I'm wondering where are all of us?
I can go. I'm Dan Jesse, and I'm at the Western Educational Equity Assistance Center at Metropolitan State University of Denver. We're housed in the School of Education, but we work with K-12 equity issues across a 13-state region, starting with Montana all the way down to New Mexico and everything west. And a lot of what you're talking about are issues that we deal with on a daily basis.
Thank you so much, Dan. It says Liz is in Boulder with the Friends School Teacher Preparation Program. Let me see who else is on here. Brittany is the alternative license program at UCCS. Dr. Sandy, where are you?
I'm also at UCCS with Beth Cutter. I'm the Assistant Dean and Director of Student Affairs for the College of Education.
Awesome. And Sue is at MSU. I did my undergrad at MSU, so I'm still a very proud Roadrunner. But sorry to cut you off, Kim. Please, I just wanted to kind of where we're.
It's nice. I didn't know if some people wanted to talk or not because the cameras weren't on, but I would love, if anybody wants to interject or talk at any time, just shout out because we want this to be a conversation. So we wanted to open up a conversation about culturally responsive practices. And William's going to start off by just talking about some of the ways we try to live these practices in the classes that we teach. Really hoping to be models of how our apprentice teachers will then use these tenets and practices with their own students. And so, William, do you want to go ahead and start talking about some of those central tenets and practices?
Sure. I think of the experience for our apprentice teachers. I want my classrooms, and I'm sure my colleagues want their classrooms to very much model a lot of the practices that we think are going to be the best for them while they are in their placement. And I really try to go out of my way to show some clear and direct ways of how they can build relationships and rapport with their students in an effort to really be able to address them as the individuals that they need and prepare them to be active members of their own families and communities, which I think can only be done if you really have a genuine and authentic relationship with your students. So we spend a good bit of time learning about storytelling in the ways in which allowing students to be able to share their stories. I model how to share my story, and I have my students, my apprentice teachers also share theirs, to really get us to understand where one another is coming from, what has brought us to where we are, and start to game plan what the next steps in our own personal evolution looks like. These personal narratives that I push my apprentice teachers and the students in my classes to take, as well as for them to try to bring into their own classrooms and their placements, naturally become an opportunity for counter storytelling, because so often the stories that are told by our students are not the status quo. So it also opens up this opportunity for these other thoughts and ideals about these people and communities that we're serving to be able to be shared in the space. We have students do a lot of kind of comparing and contrasting in a critical way their experiences with learning and with school with those of their own, of the students that they're going to be serving, knowing that chances are, if you are a grad student at an institution like DU, your time in school has been a pretty positive thing. It's a place that you enjoy. School is something that you enjoy. School is a place where you feel successful. We know that for our students in K through 12, that is not always the case. So really being able to provide space and time for those students to share what their experience with school is, how that became their feelings about school, about learning, and really what it means. Pushing our students to think about how and why they are using the instructional practices that they are. So I think it's not enough just to introduce different types of pedagogies to students, but I think it's important for us to think about how we can really start to build our own and understand and tailor our instruction to the students that we serve. One of the things that I like to push on our students is that we are not in the off the rack business. We make tailor-made suits. We want to tailor our instructional practice to the students that we serve. And we don't want to give them this off the rack just because it's, you know what I mean? It could fit and it might be a little tight or it might be a little big, but a suit is a suit is a suit. I'm not really interested in the off the rack mentality or approach to education. We're very much interested in trying to think about how we can tailor the lessons and the content and the curriculum that we're giving our students to the students that we're serving, which is why the storytelling and the rapport building is just so important. So, you know, truly those are your measurements, if you will, for learning about how to make that suit for your students, and just really building it intentionally, making sure that the our students are creating learning opportunities for the students in the schools that they're in that are going to impact their culture, their community, their family, and their lives right now, right? I really am pushing my students to say that this idea of education that is going to be better for you in the future, you'll need this in the future, is kind of obsolete. And I want the lessons that they're teaching in these schools and in these communities to be something that is applicable right now, today, and matters right now, today, right? So we're really pushing them in that space. And finally, to help with aiding all that, is constantly and consistently being able to check in with your students and building really genuine, authentic human connections, really being and encouraging our apprentice teachers to bring their full selves to their work, and also inviting their students to bring their full selves to their classrooms, right? We often talk about this, the mask that you put on when you go into work or when you go into school. And we're trying to create learning opportunities for students that allow them to take their mask off and be their full and genuine selves when they're doing this work and when they're asking their students and the communities that they serve to do the work as well.
Thank
Some
you.
of the, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you want me to go and share the examples? I guess we didn't really talk about it.
You do it, you got it.
You did so great at that. I just want to keep hearing you talk. It'd be fine with me. So we were just coming up with some examples. Like, so, you know, what does this really look like when we create a syllabus and we're really crafting those routines and opportunities for students to share about their lives and their experiences, and then connect it to the content that they're learning about. And so we were talking about how a common thread throughout all of our courses is to have some sort of personal narrative, biography writing, and sharing initially. It's not always in a paper, but it might be in the form of a multimodal representation of who you are as a literate person in your community, in your home. It might be a paper, it could be a discussion board, but really in all of our classes, we really try to start off with those stories. The trick is to have those stories continue to weave through all of the weeks of the class. So we keep coming back to those stories. I think that's sometimes a struggle for me, but I think we're really good at getting those stories out initially. One of the things I've done is institute a book club where we're really talking about having critical discussions about things that are happening with youth and with society in general. And so we've began identity book clubs in one of the courses. That's a thread throughout the course. And we look at diverse identities, and then we think about who we are in relation to the youth in the book, and then what that means in terms of the students that we serve. And so that's been a helpful way for students who don't necessarily have some of the experiences we'd like them to have, like they're still building their cultural competence, to really step into the life of another person, imagine what it's like to walk in their shoes, build empathy, and really start to understand the lives of others that may be really different from their own life, and to really dig deeply into what does that mean, and how do I then serve people, and how do I uncover my assumptions and biases and make sure that those aren't impacting me as a teacher when I work with students who have similar identities. And then we began the summer in one of our classes by doing community research. So we ask our students to research the community where they're going to be for the entire year. And so the bulk of the class is this community research project, and it actually fits in our foundations for culturally and linguistically diverse learners. And we ask them to interview community members. We ask them to spend time in their communities. We ask them to find out if the community is a remote community, where do students live that are coming to the school where they're going to work. Sometimes it's not necessarily right around the school, so they have to do that research and really dig into that. And then we ask them to create, at the end of this research, a representation of the community. And we ask that it really brings out the assets, the linguistic resources, the cultural capital of the community, so that they come then to the start of the year with some basis for understanding the community where their school is going to be. So those are just a few of those examples. And then challenges. I mean, William, I'd love for you to add to this, but we've had conversations about really trying to develop critical consciousness, not just have conversations about critical issues, and how we can really measure those shifts in a year. It's hard to know how much change is happening. And then a challenge has been, there seems to be a gap between the awareness and perspectives based on our apprentice teachers' experiences, and then the knowledge and cultural experiences of their students. And so trying to really help our students recognize that gap and build connections, and then just high quality reflections about what that means and how we treat each other, because our experiences are different. And then this is a major challenge, and I'm going to let William speak to this because I think you really talk about this very eloquently, this last bullet point.
So one of the things that we're thinking about here is twofold. One is, what does it mean to put a significant majority of white educators who are going to be entering their first year of teaching with master's degrees from an expensive college or university like DU, and all the context that comes in being able to do that, into these schools that are Title I and a majority of minoritized students? And how can we get our students to better understand that though there might be a difference in those experiences, that they can still be great teachers, that they can still have the impacts that they need to in those communities, in those schools, and with those students. In thinking about how we're going to do that, we think about how can we really push these ideas around culturally sustaining pedagogies, emancipatory pedagogies, these liberatory instructional practices onto our TEP students and prepare them. Well, one of the things that we're bumping into is the content is built to prepare a white, middle class, and up student to be able to teach in quote unquote urban space. Well, as our data shows, we do have teachers of color, and we're interested in getting more teachers of color to the programming. So what does it mean to actually have people of color having to go through programming that's built to prepare white teachers to go into urban spaces, right? There's a lot of training there, and there's a lot of education there that those students of color might not necessarily need, because their experiences may or may not align more with the students that they're going to be serving. And even if they don't economically or spatially identify the same as their teachers, as their future students, the fact that they are people of color, they have experienced some of the isms of being a person of color, and they don't necessarily need help in unpacking those because they've lived it, right? So how do we create a program that is serving the significant majority at the moment, which are those white educators, while also being cognizant of those students of color and what they leverage, and not putting them through an experience that could be just as harmful as traumatic as what we're trying to get our TEP students not to put their students through. right? So it's very much this kind of complicated piece that we're trying to work our way around.
And we'd love to hear from you. Like, I put a chart down here if you would rather type, or I'm going to put in the chat, but so what's working for you in your institution? What are your tenants' routines and practices? And what are some challenges for you?
And if you have any questions and need any clarity,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, or any questions are great.
While your fellow faculty and leaders are doing that, maybe you could talk more about what does come first. You know, do we recruit a more diverse student population to be teachers, or, you know, kind of decolonize the pedagogy and the curriculum first, or to attract more, or how is DU approaching that?
I would like to get as many apprentice teachers of color as possible, for multiple reasons. One, something that the data has shown over time is that students in particular, students of color in public education, having teachers of color can radically change and impact their experience in K through 12 education. That being the case, I would love for DU, no disrespect to any of the institutions here, lead the way in what that looks like, right? For that very reason, for the fact that it can give a better K through 12 experience to those students of color who will be exposed to teachers of color. Now, do I just want to throw a body with melanin in front of these teachers, in front of students, because aesthetically it's more appealing? No, I want them to be the best of the best of the best of the best when it comes to teaching. So what I think has to happen is that too often these conversations have said, like, well, we either have to recruit and retain teachers of color, or we have to do this thing with the pedagogy and instructional practice, content, the curriculum, all of that. I don't think you can do those things separately, right? I think what we have to be mindful of is, all right, let's think about our recruiting practices into teacher education programs in the same way that we would want to leverage the funds of knowledge of our students in a K through 12 setting. We also need to leverage the funds of knowledge that can come with those people of color that we recruit into our programming. So the goal, because a majority of the students are probably still going to be white students, is can't be to not create this critical space for them to learn about the places that they're going to be serving, but it's going to be for them to learn about it and for them to also learn about it from people who are going on the journey with them, right? So it's thinking about, what does it look like to have, in this example that we have here, the 6 students that we have of color, what does it mean and how can we leverage their experience in schools and help their experience and their understanding of the K through 12 education prepare the other teachers without putting a burden on those 6 teachers, right? Without making them feel like, now I got to be a spokesman for fill in the blank group and I have to teach on top of learn, on top of this, on top of that, right? Can it be done? I think it can. I just think it's going to take some strategic thinking about it, and just being really, really mindful about how we go about doing it.
Is DU's curriculum there, do you think, or is it kind of always evolving to be more culturally responsive and catch up with the population that you're trying to serve? Or
I think we've somewhat had an individual approach to curriculum up until now, and I think we're really looking forward to maybe really centralizing decolonization or culturally responsive pedagogy, or humanizing pedagogies more throughout our syllabi, but it's just going to take time. I think people do it in really thoughtful individual ways, but if we could collectively have some common threads, it could be more impactful for our students. And we can learn from one another. So I think we have some growth to do there in terms of building more consistency and cohesiveness.
I'm sure that's being considered as you consider a new dean to, the work that's yet to be done.
Yeah, and
I didn't mean to hijack the conversation about what's working well.
no, and I think it is evolving. Like I would hope any program is consistent as their teacher, as the students that they're serving and the communities that those teachers will ultimately serve are changing and growing. I think we are starting to think about how we can better kind of streamline some fundamentals or some principles throughout our coursework to ensure that these things happen. But it is definitely a work in progress.
I think the FEAT has been a really unifying framework for us, and one that Dr. Salazar has been bringing to different districts, and it's been getting a lot of attention. But having a common assessment tool for all of us that's guiding our coursework and the field work definitely brings consistency.
Other questions, thoughts?
Where are all you in the process? What's working and what's not working? And I see a question about the EdTPA. We do not use the EdTPA. I went to school at CU Boulder and supervised there and am familiar with it, but we don't. So we have our students fill out a demonstration of their learning through a portfolio at the end of the year. And there are key things that they have to collect and show. And then through the FEAT, they are collecting evidence that they've met the competencies across the year. And we've used a video platform called Torch, and students go back into their video and they mark specific places where they're meeting those competencies, and then they put those in their demonstrations of learning. So it's been evolving. Our capstone changes just slightly a little bit every year. But William, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's really it. One of our issues that has popped up with supervision is I would like for us to be able to spend more time with the people that we supervise and being more direct coaches and mentors to these folks, as unfortunately it's this idea of like, can we afford more supervisors? It's the same issues that always pop up, I'm sure, across boards. But I think it's one of those things where we have to rethink about what it means to be a supervising teacher. I think it's also one of the things where I think could help us with this and ensuring that our teacher candidates are getting the best prep that they can. I would like for all of our institutions to really rethink what it means to be a mentor teacher. So like, as we're placing these teachers into different schools throughout the district, I think often those placements happen with folks. And I say this not to belittle it by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like it happens almost more out of convenience than it does out of being able to identify amazing teachers and saying, we need this amazing teacher to mentor the next generations of teachers, or whatever the case may be, the next class of teachers, in order for them to get ready. And us also making and elevating the role of the mentor teacher so that it becomes more of a badge of honor, more of something that teachers who have been teaching for a long time in districts and are great and amazing at it are looking for, are really feeling celebrated when they're asked to be mentor teachers. And it's not just something where it's like, oh, Metro or DU reached out and said I could be a mentor teacher. Sure, I'll do it. But it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I've been asked to do this. I'm being recognized by this institution as somebody who is best equipped to be able to, you know what I mean, support another teacher in becoming a teacher. And like, there's honor, there's privilege, there's prestige that comes with it. And then I think that coupled with better ideas around supervision, those supervisors being able to monitor and look over less teachers can make field placement work look a lot different for future teachers. Yeah, Liz, similar to you, I have 11 that I'm working with this. And it, like, how much time am I really going to be able to spend with those people, right? Ideally, 3 to 5 would be amazing. You know, I think about if I had 5 folks, God forbid, I mean, 3 people, I could be in their classrooms with them twice a month. You know what I mean? Providing very detailed, concrete feedback with action steps that I can be back in the next week to be able to reobserve, to be able to provide more feedback. I can be working a lot more in partnership with those mentor teachers around lesson planning, around all those other things. But with 11 in various schools across the city, you know what I mean? It just restricts the time to be able to do such a thing. I know, Kim, you feel kind of some of those similar pressures with the numbers that we have to deal with.
Yeah, even the word supervisor, like, I'd love to change that to more coaching, but I know we're required to supervise and provide evaluations. And true coaching, you're not necessarily evaluating the teachers that you're working with, but I'd love to see us integrate a more holistic coaching model within that. That's somewhat teacher driven, and we can really meet the individual needs of our apprentice teachers. Oh, advisors. That's good. So that, I think one of the things that could help too is we're trying to build relationships with schools where we have multiple mentor teachers in a school. And so then one supervisor is at that school and that community and able to touch base with everybody and see everybody when they're there versus having multiple places all over. So like really building core relationships with certain schools. Has anybody had success with that? Being in a couple of schools or contexts?
I definitely have worked. We have several different partner schools that we work with each year, and we have generally a handful of teacher candidates placed in each of these schools. So it is really wonderful when I can kind of be at one school, but with the number of teacher candidates that I'm advising, that ends up being 4 or 5 different schools these days. So, but having that is really nice to just be able to walk down the hall and visit with everyone while I'm there. That's been nice.
Yeah, well, and with the partner schools, we're looking at providing multiple supports. So having ELPS be there, having our school psychology as well provide support. So really thinking about not how they can just help us, but how we can then in turn help them and provide more holistic support. So we've been trying to do that.
I think, Kim, you're touching on Liz are touching on two big things. I definitely think as we're moving forward, we're thinking about how we might be able to reduce the number of schools and make more strategic partnerships so that they can be in less places and more mentors there. And also thinking about what could it mean for a school to have like really wraparound supports within it, all coming from one particular institution. I would love to have a social worker, a psych, a counselor, an administrator, and 4 teacher candidates all in one building, right? What could it mean to bring that type of a whole unit of folks to these different schools to be able to help them learn how to grow into their professional career, but also support that school in that space, right? Especially if it's a school where you've recognized where the social worker who's there is top notch and amazing. The administration that there is already great. They have great school counseling. They have great school, like all those pieces are there so that the mentoring part of it is also strong, right? And then the next year when those people move on, you're bringing in another group to do the same thing over again. And it really becomes a hub of growing professionals within education. And then it's not something that kind of happens by happenstance in all these different places, right? It's something that actually becomes consistent. It's something that those schools where we've created those partnerships can also hang their hat on by saying, hey, we are a training institution. Not only is your kid going to get a great education here, but we're also helping to contribute to sustain great teaching throughout this city, throughout this state, throughout, you know what I mean? And being able to provide something for those schools to also be excited to have our candidates in there for.
Yeah, I was thinking about this difference in the chat about how I went through a traditional teacher education program, and when you're student teaching, you're there for a shorter amount of time, and our apprentice teachers are there the whole year. So it's really important we find those high quality settings because they're not going out and observing like 10 different people, although we do plan observations and other experiences for them, but it's the bulk of their experience. So I guess too, it becomes really critical.
Well, I had to amend my statement because they do 1 semester of field experience where they flip from middle school to high school, and then they request a placement for their a full semester of student teaching. And so back to the partner schools question, that works out well because we become familiar with all of the faculty that's there and any initiatives that they're starting and that kind of thing. But from time to time, we've noticed that, if there's teacher turnover and there aren't as many really quality cooperating teachers, that can be problematic. Sometimes a school has some kind of a hardship. We've had in the Pikes Peak region, we've been hit by some catastrophic wildfires. And so partner schools say, not this year, we have too many kids who've been impacted by a fire or, some other catastrophe. And so that's when it's nice to have just a big collection of partner schools. In our alternative teacher licensure program that I coordinate, we have candidates this year in 12 different school districts and 17 different schools. So that has its advantages and disadvantages as well.
No, thank you, Beth. I think that that circumstance piece is really critical. In particular, I think about one of the issues we're facing this year now is due to teacher shortage and crises for various reasons. Our teacher candidates being asked to step into their teaching roles far sooner than they probably would feel comfortable. But it's out of that need. It's out of those dire straits that are happening in our schools. I for one think we should be mindful of that too, as we're thinking about our placements and thinking about what does it mean to go through our programs, that like we are in a state of education that I don't see this changing by next year, 2 years, 3 years. I think these dire straits for quality teachers is just going to continue to rise. Well, what does it mean then that if we have all these potential teachers, how can we prepare them to be able to say, well, if you're being asked to step into this place, all right, we can help you step into it. These are the supports that we can provide while you're also learning to do the job you're being asked to and potentially paid to do, right? It's just one of those things I think we really have to kind of break away from the traditional way of thinking about teacher program. Is like you have the luxury of time to sit and learn how to be a teacher when that's not always the case. They might need you right now. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean? What does that mean for them?
I think it's a great time. Like we imagine we could close with like a call for action. We could talk about like how collectively we could support one another. I think William brought up that we have very different contexts, very different programs, but what are some of those common threads or themes that we could support each other with in moving forward? I think that's what William and I are really interested in. We're interested in connecting with you and finding out how we can support one another and ways that we can connect outside of here. So we're just really in the last part of just our call for action and reflection. And we'd love to hear from you if you all have any ideas of ways we might move forward or ways we might collaborate or begin to solve some of these issues. I know we're all so busy, right? William and I are in our last week of the quarter. And you all aren't on quarter system, so you probably can't. It's just craziness.
Well, I won't speak for Brittany, but I will say that she has put together at least a couple that I know of these communities of practice. One that I got a chance to be a part of recently had to do with family and community engagement, and just sort of building a dialogue between people with who were like-minded, who were trying to think about ways to make things better. So if there's a way that we can help put things like that together, I know we would love to do those sorts of things as well. But that's just one little bit of an idea or a little bit of an experience that has come on our end from a state agency for sure.
And I also, as we're thinking about ways that, I'm sorry, Brittany, I didn't mean to.
No, please.
As we're thinking about the ways that we can collaborate, I know we're all very much interested in having our teacher candidates come to our institutions because our institutions have something to offer for those people who are going to go through it and for those communities that they're going to serve in. I think a healthy sense of competition is also nice too. Like I love Metro State and I love the education I was able to get there. But I want to have the best program and I want to be the best, right? Not because I don't want y'all to be the best, but I want us to be iron sharpening iron. So like a place where we can put our best practices so that I can steal from Boulder and Boulder can steal from me and they can steal from Metro and all the other places that are represented here, and how we can all be working towards a common goal of serving our teacher candidates the best way we can, with the ultimate goal of serving the communities that they'll enter the best we can. I'm very much here for that too.
I love that, William, and thank you. That's, lifts all boats, right? And so if we can create opportunities to learn with and from each other, we for sure want to do that. This has been such an exceptional week to be able to learn from all of you. And so however we can help support keeping this up, I for sure don't want this week to be the end of the discussion, because it is so nice to, learn and to discuss these problems of practice together. And so absolutely want to keep having these conversations.
I would be curious to have a better sense of retention and perhaps what contributes to teacher retention in urban contexts, just to better understand, what what all of our different programs are doing that's working, and what qualities we're seeing in these teachers who are sticking around.
No, Liz, I think that's huge. I know we're starting to think about ways that we can better support our teachers. I know with most traditional programs, you graduate, you go find a job, and then we're thinking about how can we support teachers beyond their exiting of our programs and making sure they're feeling consistently prepared and developed as teachers, so they don't get to that year 3 and they're like, I'm out of here, it's just still too much, or that year 5, but they start to feel like I've been supported through that really hard first year. I'm still being supported in that second year, and I'm going to my 3rd year really prepared, and I might even also be willing to come back and help with the next folks who are going through the same type of programming. So we're also trying to think about it like that in the sense of helping with retention. I agree 110%. Let's please put some brain power towards what that could look like.
And I think the districts are really interested in partnering around this issue as well, because it is a pervasive issue for them. I started a small project with first-year teachers, and it ended up being with COVID, and I was looking at how I could support them in their first year in the field. And my support actually felt like one other thing for them at that time. And so it's like, how do we integrate that with what's happening in the district? So it's not more, but it's actually really supportive and geared towards what they need. And because sometimes they're in survival mode that first year.
Very much so. Very, very much so. Any other thoughts as we approach 1 o'clock? We definitely want to respect and honor everyone's time. We thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both for being here today, and for creating a space for this conversation to not only start here, but hopefully continue on into the future. And as we said, whatever we can do to kind of help that along. I think we all want to be part of this, and find different and better ways to make everybody the best program that they can be.
One though, right?
I have no horse in this race. That's fine. I'm an IU Hoosier, so it doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Won't hold that against you.
That's fine. But William and Kimberly, thank you so much for being here today, for presenting. Thanks to you all for joining us today. We do have a few more presentations throughout the rest of this week. Please join us if you can. We have one starting in just a few minutes that Britt's going to lead. So please feel free to join us. And as always, we're gonna make all the recordings available to everyone who couldn't be here, couldn't join. So we'll be able to share that with everyone as well. So again, thank you all so much for joining us today, and everybody have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
You.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.